Have you ever wondered which ghost hunting equipment will ghost you when you need it the most? What? Or which tools have a chance of capturing real paranormal evidence and which should be cast into the abyss for all eternity? Well, stick around while I give you the best and worst ghost hunting gadgets. Hi, I'm Mike, and a quick disclaimer, all ghost hunting equipment is unproven and theoretical. But with that being said, let's get into it. Okay, so let's kick things off with trigger objects. This can be anything from Bible and rosary beads to military medals or old coins or anything really that you think could create a memory and invoke spiritual interaction. I'm going to put trigger objects into the worth trying tier, mainly because it seems entirely dependent on which spirit you're interacting with and which object you're using at that time, but we've personally had some very interesting results when using a King James Bible in an old church, where the presence of the Bible and reading passages from it seemed to stir up more activity. So to me, trigger objects are worth trying, with the exception of our next item, haunted dolls. Haunted dolls need to go straight into the fucking bin, in my opinion. While they may have merit in terms of trigger objects or are seemingly legitimate in terms of Danny Moss's Grace doll, the vast majority of these just seem to be dolls. If you look on eBay, it's flooded with alleged haunted dolls ranging from £25 to £100 per doll. This begs the question that if you truly had a haunted doll, where's the evidence for it and why would you be selling it so cheap? For the vast majority of cases, the dolls aren't haunted and it's just a way to make money from selling creepy children's toys in the bin easily, just straight in the bin with them. Next up, let's talk about temperature sensors. Now, it's important to make the distinction between ambient temperature sensors and like the temperature guns you see people use. In my opinion, the temperature guns aren't using because they only measure the surface temperature of whatever you're pointing at, so for instance the wall that you're pointing at rather than the air temperature around you. My personal favourite temperature device is the TAD device from Skytech. It's an ambient temperature sensor that detects drops and rises in temperature and alerts you when it detects one. I'm going to put this again into the worth trying tier. Now, although temperature changes can be perfectly natural, it's good when these go off in tandem to other devices going off or when a relevant question is asked. Say for instance, if you ask for the air to get colder and then the device registers as it getting colder, which has happened in our experience. Next is the EMF meter. You'll probably recognise this as a K2 meter. Now, the K2 meter has become so synonymous with ghost hunting that every EMF meter is actually referred to as a K2, irrespective of if it is or not. And you'll have probably seen the K2 meter on almost every ghost hunting program, and for good reason. The 5 LEDs on them that change in colour depending on how strong the EMF signal is are very easy to read in a pitch black room, hence why ghost hunters like them so much. I'm going to put the EMF meter into the must-own category. Now, before you go at me in the comments, I know they can be triggered by false positives, and I know that they're not the most accurate of devices for ghost hunting. As I said in the intro, everything's theoretical, so we don't really know, and personally, I've had an amazing experience with a K2 where it was spiking all the way to red when we were asking relevant questions about what we believe was a 13-year-old boy, and then not spiking at all when we asked questions, say for instance around the child's dad still being in his life. So that was the moment that sort of convinced me that the K2 is a must-own. They're also relatively cheap, so if you're starting out as a ghost hunter, they're worth getting. The next item is the Ovulus or Alice box, and while I can only really speak for the Alice box because that's what we own and use the majority of the time, I have used it extensively and we've gotten some good results with it. I'm going to put the Alice box into the great tier. And whilst these devices are prone to spitting out gibberish, as I say, we've had some excellent coincidences with it. For instance, we had the words found and pound come through the box simultaneously as my fiancée was putting her hand into her pocket and touched a pound coin. On our Alice box in particular, my name seems to come up more often than it should when there's apparently 2,000 random words in the box. And once we did an experiment where I took a random tarot card and put it in an envelope. Only I knew what the tarot card was. I asked out loud to the spirit we believe we were communicating with if it could say the name of the tarot card in the envelope, and the word moon came through the Alice box, which was the card in the envelope. We all kind of lost our minds because the probability of it happening is so low it almost seems too coincidental to actually be a coincidence. I will say that the box has taken a good year to warm up to us and to start producing what feels like good results, but we absolutely love this thing. And the only reason that I can't put it in the must-own category is because of the price. These things are mad expensive for what they are. Moving on to the Ouija board, I'm going to have to put this into the skeptical tier. From all the Ouija board sessions I've witnessed, very rarely do they actually give good results. Often the information that comes through is either known or very easily found through a quick Google search, or the information could even be forced by someone touching the planchette. For instance, getting the letters D and U for a first name, and then before the planchette moves to the next letter shouting Dudley, which then puts that thought into everyone touching's minds, and lo and behold, the name Dudley comes out after that point because you've influenced the board. And yes, this did actually happen on an event we've attended. And even if none of the above is applicable, this could also be the ideomotor effect, where you subconsciously move the planchette via microscopic muscle movements in your fingers without actually realising. I personally don't use Ouija boards because I feel that they can be manipulated too easily, and as I say, I've never really seen a massively convincing session with one, and because of that I'm going to have to put it into the speculative tier out of fairness. While you're here, if you like the video, please drop a like on it and consider subscribing to the channel. Thank you. Paranormal music boxes are music boxes that are often triggered by an infrared motion detector, such as a security light that you'd have at home. And the idea is that you leave these in a doorway or a central area of a room, and when the sensor is triggered, it will play the music box and play like a suitably spooky tune. I'm going to put this into the worth trying category once again, and while I agree that they can give off false positives and are madly expensive, they can be quite a useful device. I also have a video of how you can build one very cheap up here if you'd like to watch it. Next is the EVP recorder. Now, EVP recorders alongside EMF detectors are probably one of the most widely used pieces of equipment in the paranormal research field, or ghost hunting field if you will. As with all equipment, there's an element of false positives or audio pareidolia, but I'm going to put the EVP recorder into the must-own tier. If you're able to afford a semi-decent quality audio recorder like the Zoom H1N here, it will be invaluable to your investigations and mean that you're able to capture so much more evidence just from having one of these. But saying that, don't be fooled into thinking that the ludicrously expensive Panasonic DR60 is the holy grail of EVP recorders, because that thing is garbage and needs to go in the bin. SLS cameras are the next item, and they can join the Haunted Dolls straight in the bin. This bootleg Xbox Kinect camera is actually configured to try and map human shapes, hence why it will often pick up a chair or a coat hanger and map a stick man to it. Coupled with the fact that Microsoft recommend that you keep it on a static tripod rather than waving it around like Harry Potter's wand, these things are just mad expensive and not worth bothering with. They're garbage. Don't use them. Conversely to the SLS camera, the infrared camera is a must-have piece of equipment. These are the absolute best way to record anything that could be paranormal activity. Even if nothing else and you're using them as locked-off cameras, we've had some amazing captures just from leaving a camera in a room with a semi-decent microphone and just observing what's happening while no one's around. And without some sort of video or audio recording, everything you capture on a ghost hunt is just anecdotal evidence, rather than having any footage you can show someone to back it up, for instance. Even if you go down the route of just buying a couple of trail cameras to set up and leave for the entire of your investigation, IR cameras are an absolute must-have. Next is a very underrated and underused piece of equipment, the barometric or air pressure sensor. There is some backing to show that paranormal activity is often accompanied by some sort of air pressure fluctuation. I personally use the Skyer Aeroflux, which are great, compact and cheap, and measure barometric or air pressure. We've had some good results using them, and they often sort of go off in tandem to other devices, so I'm going to put these firmly into the great tier. Sticking in the great tier, let's talk about spirit boxes. This comes with a couple of caveats. They are prone to audio pareidolia, and you do get some radio bleed with them. But still, saying that, we've had some fantastic results with our spirit box, especially when utilising the Estes method, and on top of that we'll go one step further where we have the person listening to the spirit box in a entirely different area of the location, will be in an entirely separate area, and will basically ask questions for a one-way telephone conversation. We employed this method at the Stoke Haunted Museum when we went with our friend Greg upstairs while we were all downstairs, and we got some insane results, to the point that there was a moment where Patsy kept asking the same question over and over again, and Greg just blurts out, "Stop saying that," immediately. And it was one of those things, again, seemingly a bit too coincidental to be a coincidence. The next piece of equipment is one that's used very widely and has very often shown to trigger false positives. Cat balls can go straight into the bin. There is footage showing that if you clap closely and hard enough next to a cat ball, that will set it off. And often when you get one of those moments where you put it down and it starts triggering repeatedly, swapping the cat balls will totally stop that from happening, which says to me that it's more likely a dodgy cat ball rather than anything paranormal happening. There may be some merit in using a cat ball like this that doesn't actually include any electronics, but for the widely used electronic light up ones, you may as well just throw them in the bin because they're not worth using. Finishing off our lists, we're going to go to REM pods. Now, I'm going to put the REM pod into the great tier. We've had some fantastic sessions with a REM pod where it was seemingly answering on command to relevant questions. And while I say that, and I'm aware that they can be triggered by false positives, i.e. from a walkie-talkie setting them off or other means, I really like them and I'm going to continue using them. The only thing I will say is, again, why they end up in the great tier and not the must-own is because the actual REM pod can be mad expensive. And you can get a lot cheaper ones off of sites like Etsy where people are home brewing them, or if you're feeling extra adventurous, there's a guide on how to make one on the channel. And that's the list. I hope you enjoyed it and would love to hear your opinions or experiences with any of the equipment featured on it. And now that you know the best equipment to use, why not watch this video here to find the best places in the UK to use it. I hope you enjoy, and I'll see you in the next video.